So this is the fourth video covering activity 4.5. In this video, we're going to factor trinomials. Your textbook would like you to memorize patterns, different multiplication patterns, but I think I'm going to teach you a method that will not require any memorization, okay? I've taught this class for a number of years, and my students have told me the method that I'm about to introduce makes the most sense, and my students have had the most success with this method. Okay, so let's take a look at example 5. Right, it says factor x squared plus 4x plus 3. So I'm going to start with a table. And I'm going to ask myself, what two numbers when multiplied, give me the last term, and when added result in the middle term? Okay, so the 3 would be considered my last term. The 4 is my middle term. So I'll put a 3 here and a 4 here. So what two numbers when multiplied give me 3? Well, think about it. I could do 1 times 3, or I could do negative 1 times negative 3. But now when I add them, right, so the first requirement was what two numbers when multiplied give me the last term. So 1 times 3 and negative 1 times negative 3 will result in 3. But my second requirement is when I add those two numbers, I need to arrive at the middle term. So 1 plus 3 is 4, and negative 1 plus negative 3 is negative 4. All right, so it looks like this would be our winner, the 1 and the 3, okay, right? Because when I multiply them, I arrive at the last term, which is 3. When I add these two numbers together, I arrive at the middle term, which is 4. So the answer would look something like this: x plus 1, x plus 3. And that's my answer. Now, if I were to use FOIL, I can arrive back at the starting point. Okay, right? Remember, if you did FOIL, first, outer, inner, last, right? Here's my first term. I have x squared. My outer term gives me plus 3x. Then the inner terms would give me x. And my last term is 3. And then when I combine like terms, I end up with x squared plus 4x plus 3, which is what we had up here, okay? So when I say factor, right, this is actually our answer, right? Let me just rewrite this neatly. X plus 1 times x plus 3. Okay, so if I gave you this example 5 and I said, please factor, this would be your answer, okay? So, and we're using essentially what I call the table method. So let's try a few more. Scroll down, look at example 6. So if I use the table method for example 6, I have to remember, okay, what two numbers when multiplied result in the last term, but when added result in the middle term? So the negative 6 is my last term. The negative 1, right, think of that as negative 1t, is my middle term. So what are the ways to get negative 6? I can do negative 2 times positive 3. That's negative 6. But when I add this together, I get positive 1. I can also multiply 2 times negative 3. That will give me negative 6. But when I add them together, I get negative 1. So this is really my winner. Right? What two numbers when multiplied give me negative 6, but when added result in negative 1? So the answer is 2 and negative 3. So how do I write this? I would say t plus 2 times t minus 3. Now, why did I say negative 3? Well, down here, that was what we had, right? Negative 3. Now, I always have students ask, well, Mike, what if I wrote my answer as t minus 3 times t plus 2. Is that okay? And the answer is yes. The order doesn't matter. So I would accept either of these answers. So I'll just write or. Okay? Let's keep moving. Let's go to example 7. So example 7 requires a little bit of work before we start drawing our table. Okay, when I draw my table, that only works if the leading coefficient is +1. So here I have a 4 in front of my w squared. So I'm going to have to do something about that. I think if we factor out a 4, right, I'm going to factor out the 4. And if I divide each term by what I've just factored out, if I divide each term by 4, I'll end up with w squared plus 6w minus 27. Okay, again, where did these numbers come from? If I divide each term by what I factor out, that's what you get left in the middle of the parentheses, okay? You might say, why did I use 4? Well, 4 is the biggest number that goes into each of these terms, okay? So now I can use the table approach. All right, so again, what two numbers when multiplied result in the last term, which in this case is negative 27, but when added result in the middle term? In this case, it's positive 6. All right, well, what are the ways to come up with 27? I think I can do 3 times negative 9, but the problem is when I add these together, I get negative 6. We need positive 6. So what about negative 3 times positive 9? Okay, when I add those together, I get positive 6. So that's my winner. Okay, right? What two numbers when multiplied result in the last term? That's negative 3 and 9. But when added, result in the middle term? That's positive 6. So this works. So don't forget, this 4 doesn't just disappear. You have to write the 4. And then we're going to say, okay, w minus 3, and then w plus 9. And now we're done. Okay, so this would be my final answer. All right, so we broke what was in parentheses, or we factored into w minus 3 and w plus 9, and the 4 comes down with it. So I'm going to scroll down. It looks like we have some practice problems. So let's do 1 or 2 right now, and then I'll do another video to cover the rest. So let's take a look at it, problem 22. Okay, so problem 22. Again, if we do our table, and by the way, after you've done 50 of these, you won't need the table. You'll be able to just do this in your head, okay? So what two numbers when multiplied give me the last term, which in this case is 12? I'm thinking 3 times 4 equals 12. But when added result in 7, well, 3 plus 4 is 7. So that was a quick one, okay? So we're going to write x plus 3, x plus 4. That's my final answer. Okay, a little sloppy, but that's my answer. Right? X plus 3 times x plus 4. I think we have time to squeeze one more in. Let's do number 24. All right, so in this case, what two numbers will give me 10 when multiplied and negative 7 when added, right? Don't forget the negative sign. I guess 5 and 2 will give me 10, right? So 2 times 5, but the problem is when I add that I have positive 7. I need negative 7. So let's try negative 2 and negative 5, right? That would give me positive 10. And when I add it, the result is negative 7. So your answer here would be w minus 2 times the quantity of w minus 5. And we're done. Okay? So I'm going to stop here, and we'll finish 26, 28, and 30 in the next video.